Hello and welcome to the BCU Alumni Podcast. I'm Bethan from BCU's alumni team, and in each episode we welcome different members of our alumni community back onto campus. In this special episode we are once again on tour. We're here today in the Lunar Space at our city centre campus, so thank you to those of you watching from wherever you are in the world. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week, so we were keen to bring together 4 incredible graduates whose work around men's mental health is really breaking down barriers. In the UK, suicide is the leading cause of death for men under the age of 50. Research by mental health charity Mind also found that 2 in 5 men admit to regularly feeling worried or low, and the number of men who have suicidal thoughts when feeling worried has doubled to 10% since 2009. They also found that over a third of men say that social media has a negative impact on how they feel, and that the number of men who are worried about their appearance has also risen to 23%. Our alumni panel will be discussing their own mental health experiences and will share their advice around coping with your own mental health, as well as supporting men in your family, friendship groups, workplaces, and more. So let's introduce you to our alumni panel. Today we are joined by Craig Pinkney. Craig is a criminologist, an urban youth specialist and CEO of several organisations, including Solve, the Centre for Youth Violence and Conflict, and Solve Housing. Craig has carved out a reputation as a leading expert in tackling youth violence, gang-related issues and social conflict, and he has worked with the Premier League, Birmingham Children's Trust and the Crown Prosecution Service. He focuses on providing safe, nurturing environments for children in the West Midlands, embodying his commitment to creating better futures for young people. Next we have Johnny Seifert. Johnny has worked in the radio industry for almost 10 years, working as a producer for some of the most well-known presenters, and he is also the showbiz editor for Talk TV, Talk Radio and Times Radio. He's also well known for his podcasting work, and he has hosted his own celebrity mental health podcast, Secure the Insecure, for over 5 years now, with 280 episodes featuring celebrities opening up about their mental health journeys. We're also joined by Dr. Liam Brolan, a senior lecturer in criminology and a fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Liam's PhD research focused on the co-victim experience of murder when the crime is committed in a foreign country. He's also contributed to the first academy study that explored the phenomenon of contract murder in a British context. And finally, we have Nilesh Dosa, MBE. Nilesh is the founder of I Can, You Can Too, which is a volunteer-powered grassroots company which is levelling the playing field of inequality and social mobility for young people. Nilesh also works as social mobility and purpose lead at EY, and he was awarded an MBE for services to social equality in the 2024 New Year's Honours list. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. So, we'll start with the first question then, a big question. What does it mean to be a man in 2024?
What does it mean to be a man in 2024? I think it's a difficult question because I feel like life is a journey. And I think it's all about self-discovery. And as a man of faith, I think partly it's about understanding one's purpose. You know, what are you here for? What are you here to do? What's the mission? And whilst you're on that mission, being aware of potential obstacles that you may come against. And I know sometimes we don't know what those obstacles are. So I feel that being a man in 2024 is a little bit like a blur, but I will say it's definitely a journey and one of self-exploration.
Johnny?
Yeah, I think building on that, it's the fact that you can be able to take accountability for your actions and being in control of what you can be in control of and not getting dismayed that you might not always be in control of everything. And having that responsibility and, you know, going, right, I can be accountable to myself. I can be responsible for myself. I can only control what I can control. And we know when we look at men, for example, in the 50s and the 60s, we all thought stereotypically it's the man who comes home from work with the newspaper, the cigarette, and, you know, they're the ones who have beer and they go to the darts and they play football, etc., etc. And that was the alpha male. Whereas I think now it's going, well, let's actually be real. Who's the real us? Let's be authentic to us. Let's give this new version of masculinity that is authentic to who we want to be ourselves and also how we want to portray ourselves to others.
Liam?
I think it's about responsibility. It's about taking responsibility for yourself and potentially for those around you, whether it's your friends or your family. And I also think it's about balance as well. In a world where it's very easy to not have things in balance, I think it's about finding, moderation. So whether it's enjoying yourself too much, whatever it might be, I think it's about finding balance for me.
Nilesh?
It's a really good question, actually. The way I interpreted it was, my instinct was to say it felt like a really loaded question. What does it mean to be a man, And it kind of instinctively gave this version of the man that Johnny referred to, that 50s, 60s. But thankfully, I feel that version is becoming outdated. And if I think of what it means to be a man today, I think it's the way in which we're juggling multiple responsibilities, wearing multiple hats. So, for example, being a dad that doesn't just earn the money. Being a husband that doesn't mean that you just got married and you're a husband now. And it's, how do we lead? How do we talk about our emotions? How are we being inclusive to other men? And getting rid of this man up type mentality that, for example, I grew up with. So yeah, they were my thoughts on that question.
Okay, so would you be able to tell us then about times where you have struggled with your own mental health, and I guess almost what helped you through that time as well, and importantly, who did you speak to during that time, and were you able to share the load with? Craig?
It's a hard one, and I think just with some of our colleagues and friends of what we've said, I think I grew up in a time where you had to man up. You were told, keep quiet, just keep going. This belief that you've got all of these responsibilities, or you're going to grow into these responsibilities, and there's no time and there's no space for weakness. And I guess as I've got older, and I guess also working with predominantly young men, I know that there is a space for vulnerability.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the idea about what it is and what it means to be a man, I think about some of my darkest times and darkest moments, and that can be anything from, loss of a loved one. That can be anything from a loss of a young person, a child in our local community. Anything from, losing a friendship. Even, having a business and being successful and having people within business turn against you. And I guess how you kind of manage that, and how I feel like it took me a while to get to that place, and I felt like some of us become quite hypocritical. We say you should do this and do that, and I guess therapy was my first step. I think that the therapy was a first step after a lot of really dark spaces and dark times, and whilst I can say, I go to the gym, whilst I can say, I go on holiday, there was still a part of me that really needed some real help, and that's where the introduction of therapy came in. But I think that vulnerability and those dark moments, I think as men we don't talk about, and I think I welcome those conversations because it becomes so important.
Johnny?
I think it's where I lose that sense of belonging, and belonging to myself, belonging to my peers, or belonging to what is in society. And as a journalist, I face it a lot, that I'll get a really good interview on my podcast, Securely Insecure, which is, celebrities from Love Island, Married at First Sight, reality stars, who are being vulnerable for the first time and being given this space. And then you go, oh my God, that's a scoop. That could make the front page. That's going to be a massive story. And I go, oh my God, this is amazing. And then that paranoia and anxiety sits in of going, does that feed the morals that I have and the values that I have for myself as a person because they've trusted me, versus, well, I need that exposure to make my podcast bigger. That's your free marketing. And that paranoia plays in your head. And I've had it at times where I've interviewed someone, it's become a massive story. They've then had to put out a statement because they felt that they'd gone too far, and it's in the public domain. And then if they're not taking responsibility for it, I'm taking responsibility, because who else is going to be accountable then? And the problem I find a lot of the time is, and I'm having therapy at the moment, is I'm taking the burden for other people because other people aren't taking responsibility. And so if they're not taking responsibility, someone has to. Well, I may as well step up to plate for that. And that's not good enough. My way around that is, like I said, having the therapy, but also in that moment when you're having that down moment, there's three things I do. The first is breathing. So there's a podcast called Sleep Cove, which I absolutely love, and I meditate to that to go to bed every night. But also I'll put a breathing one on just to calm the breathing. Then I'll call the Samaritans. Their phone number is 116-123. I've got it stuck in my head. And the Samaritans, we've always known of the charity that you call when you're feeling suicidal, when you're on top of a bridge, for example. The Samaritans are there all time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can just call them. And all they say to you is just, why have you called? How does that make you feel? And just gives you the space to talk through it. And it's like a jigsaw in your head. And sometimes when you're going through something, that jigsaw's so convoluted that you don't really know how to think straight. And they just go, look, just take a step back. Just think about it. What's the worst that can happen? Has anyone actually died? Has anyone actually really been at risk? Or is it all in your head? And once you've done that process, then start brain dumping it and journaling it out. And once you've done that, so you've spoken it through, you've practiced your breathing, and then you've journaled it, it's gone. It's on the piece of paper now. It's the paper's responsibility. It's not yours anymore. And that's kind of the experiences that I go through quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I think there's been several times over the last few years where I've realised that mental health is perhaps more fragile than what I first thought it was. Certainly the passing of my dad, I lost him 7 years ago to cancer, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and was probably the most significant mental health challenge that I've faced, and one that I think is still ongoing. But there's also been other things, relationship breakdowns, fallout with friends, things about my identity in terms of what I'm doing with my life and where I'm going, all of those things that can contribute to feeling like you're not as stable as you would like to be. Yeah. I think in terms of the sources of support, certainly for me, I've found strength in talking to friends. And I'm very fortunate to have a group of friends that are quite open about talking about their mental health and some of the difficulties that they face. I have other people in my life that I would consider to be almost like father figures. And obviously in the absence of my dad, I find quite a great deal of value in that. And you guys have mentioned already the importance of therapy and talking. And, I've been through a short period of therapy relatively recently. And I found that to be incredibly beneficial. And it was something that at first I never thought would have been helpful. But actually, once you start going through that process, you realise that talking is an incredibly powerful tool for dealing with some of the mental health difficulties that you might be facing. So that's me.
Nilesh?
I found this question really fascinating, Bethan, actually, because I think when I now look back, I think I've struggled with my mental health on and off for a very long time. But the funny part of this is that I didn't know that I was struggling with my mental health in the early parts. Because of this, go to sleep, you'll be fine tomorrow morning, man up, all this stuff that we mentioned a moment ago. So actually, let me refer to a period when I knew that I wasn't right mentally. And that was at a really big inflection point in my own life. So in my mid-30s, I'd become a dad recently. I was born with a rare, incurable neurodegenerative condition, which started to get worse. And at around the same time is when I'd sort of made a step change in my voluntary work. And the stuff that I was hearing and seeing amongst the community, particularly a black boy who thought that he wasn't allowed to come into the city, all of these things came to a head. And for me, that period was a period where, we often talk about the cloud following you around. It feels dark. You don't want to get out of bed, that sort of stuff. And I realized that that's what mental health is. It's you're not okay, and it's accepting that, and it's what can I do and what am I going to do? And for me, it was seeking professional help, which as a 43-year-old from an Indian background, and at that time felt like a real taboo. But I definitely kind of went, this isn't right, and I have to do something. I actually found, and not because she's listening, but my wife was a fantastic help, and sort of letting go of my ego and vulnerabilities and sharing. And I think that where I am now with it is at this interesting point where I kind of accept that, like happiness, it's just a fleeting time, and there are bad days, and that's okay, because actually that's part of being human. And so why wouldn't I suffer and go through those emotions?
Absolutely. Liam, and you've actually just mentioned this, but you lost your dad very early into studying for your PhD. So what impact did that have on your mental health, and how were you able to deal with that grief?
So my dad was diagnosed with relatively late stage bowel cancer in 2016, in April of 2016, and he was effectively given 6 months to live. So by the December of the same year, he'd passed away. And I guess the nature of his illness and the sort of rapid degeneration that I witnessed contributed quite significantly to the bereavement and the subsequent grieving process, because, you know, in front of my very eyes, I literally watched him, you know, lose his physical health and sort of the mental health complications that went along with that as well. So I think, I know we're talking about mental health, but I think one of the things that we should also highlight amongst men is the reluctance sometimes to talk about physical health as well. And I suppose in my dad's circumstances, you know, he was having symptoms of the cancer probably 12 to 18 months prior to him actually being formally diagnosed. And perhaps had he have listened to those warning signs that his body was exhibiting, perhaps he would still be here today, because bowel cancer is, if it's caught early enough, is one of the most curable cancers. So I think that had an impact. And I guess, you know, as I spent time with him as he was approaching his final days and weeks, I spoke to him a lot about his own life and the things that he had done and the things that perhaps he hadn't done as well. And one of the main lessons that he left me with was that he wished that he had done more. He wished that he'd travelled more. He wished that he'd tried new things. He wished that he'd gone and met new people, all those sorts of things. So I think that played into my grief, and I would describe it in two ways. Firstly, I think it was difficult, of course, because at 25 years old, you know, you're at a position where you're just starting to figure out what it means to be a man. And oftentimes you can still turn to your dad and say, listen, you know, am I on the right path? Try and get your fatherly advice and whatever. So I felt like there was an absence there, which I still struggle with sometimes. I still wish that I could have a conversation with him, have a beer with him and tell him about all the things that I've been up to. But on the flip side, I would say that most of my personal development, whether that's professional, academic, whatever it might be, has come following the passing of my dad, you know, and I feel like I've become a better, more well-rounded, more mature, more empathetic person as a result of his passing. So grief has been twofold for me, I would say. It's been difficult, but it's also been quite transformative as well.
Yeah.
Johnny, you interview celebrities about their mental health. So what common themes do you see amongst the men that you interview? What can trigger their mental health?
Yeah, it's all about validation. I think most people I speak to are looking to be validated by something or someone. For the people that I'm interviewing, they're going, right, I need to be famous and I need to have my big social media following and I need to do a TV show. And even whilst that's being filmed, think about the next TV show that's going to be filmed. And they're looking to kind of seek to be the top. They have to be the biggest person, and they can't do it. It's impossible. And, you know, it's the same as for us on a much smaller level, going, well, I just want all the money. And you go, well, here's £1,000. You get the £1,000. I want £2,000. I want £2,000. I want £5,000. And it's that constant chasing. And I think what happens is that all these people are just chasing their thoughts in their head. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And where they can't control those thoughts and going, well, hold on a minute. I've done this TV show. You know, I've got on the show. I've beaten all these applications. Let's say it's a competition of 30 people and I came in 30th position. Well, I've managed to get on TV, so therefore I should be the most famous person. And that's when their mental health starts spiraling out, because they're going, well, hold on a minute. Why is it that I'm on TV and I'm not getting the followers? Why is it that I'm on TV and I've only got 1,000 followers and my peers are being invited to do this event and this event and this event, and they've not even got 1,000 followers? And mentally they're going, well, where's my sense of belonging now? Yeah. And I'm vulnerable, but no one is there to answer for me, and I've got no one to actually help me, because it's me who's battling myself, and it's my own inner demons. And that's why I think a lot of these people come on my podcast and generally go, I've not got the best mental health now.
Craig, you work with young people who have been involved in youth violence, social conflict and gangs. So what impact do you see these issues having on their mental health immediately and in the long term as well?
It's a daily struggle. And I think I position my answer from the perspective of survival, because a lot of young people in environments where they perceive danger to be, they're just surviving. And it's not just about violence, it's not just about postcodes, it's about their everyday lives. The same thing about belonging, the same thing about wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard. And how are they going to be seen and heard when society gives them all of these different labels that suggest that they are not fit to be in our society, and therefore we should punish them or throw them away? And I guess most of the young people that I work with, they're funny, they're gifted, they're talented, they've got so much to give, but they're battling with the perception of others and sometimes the fears that may exist within their environment, where they assume that people may be wanting to cause harm to them. So mental health, there's layers, and it goes really deep with a lot of those individuals, and then we have to talk about trauma and talk about fear. And these things I find with a lot of young men are dealing with. But I think it's also important that we open a door as well to the individuals that are supporting those young people, because it's not just them in a silo. And I think individuals like myself, I've buried over 20 young people, don't talk about it a lot. And it's funny because whilst Liam was talking, I was sitting there thinking, even the word he used was reluctant. And even when you asked me the first question, I was reluctant to say I lost my auntie 2 years ago because I didn't know how it was going to trigger me. So even whilst we're talking about vulnerability, I'm also conscious about what am I going to talk about here today, because I don't want to get triggered and start getting emotional. And then I'm like, I'm not looking how I want to be on today's podcast. So I feel like it's a constant battle. And I take the positionality of I'm amongst the community. So even when I'm talking about young people, I find it weird because I'm experiencing the same thing they're experiencing. The only difference is that they have all of the labels and I've got different labels, and I can utilize my labels to navigate where I need to get to help me benefit me in a range of different ways, where a lot of them are stuck with the labels and they can't shift them.
Nilesh, you also work obviously with a wide range of young people. How do you work with them then? And can you see a shift in their health and well-being after giving the support that they actually need?
Yeah, so we work with young people in a variety of ways. So if I bucket that up into our sort of 3 pillars, as I can, you can too, delivers its work. So the first one is around coaching and mentoring. So to Craig's point, this one is about they are gifted, they're talented, they're desperate for success, but they need someone who believes in them, can raise their aspirations by putting them in and around the people that they aspire to be. And at a very simple level, it's also about teaching them the stuff that they will need to then go and become bankers and lawyers and doctors and architects, which the setup that they find themselves in currently doesn't give that to them. Now, all of a sudden, when you can see what your future might look like, there's that shot in the arm, there's that uptick in your confidence, in your mental well-being, in your excitement and enthusiasm for life, actually. The second program that we run following the death of a little boy is all around supporting vulnerable women and children during the school holidays when they suffer disproportionately more because of poverty. So we created a community project that basically cooks meals and then lovingly goes and delivers them to the families. But actually, 30%, 40% of our volunteers are the young people from our programs. So actually now, all of a sudden, they've got the chance to pay it forward. They've got purpose, they've got community, belonging, to your point, Johnny, and you touched on it too, Craig. That, again, really benefits them. And then the final one is what we call storytelling. So this is when we get invited by corporates to do podcasts, to do town halls, etc., where we go and tell the story of our work. And actually what's really cool here is I've found public speaking really, really therapeutic. And it's so cool to see the young people using that vehicle not only to educate and bring awareness to the audience, but actually use it as almost therapy for themselves. So yeah, that's us.
Okay. Did you want to pick up your pen? So I said earlier that suicide is the leading cause of death for young men under the age of 50. I don't even like saying that out loud because it still shocks me. I think I've read this sentence a million times over the past few weeks and I'm still like, wow, I can't believe that's an actual statistic. But with something like that, where do you even begin? How can we all encourage men to talk and seek help? And why is it so hard in the first place for men to talk about issues that they might be facing?
I think for me, it's about looking in the mirror. And you heard me say earlier on about being very conscious that sometimes as men we can become hypocrites, especially in the space that I occupy, working with predominantly other men and younger men. Looking in the mirror becomes so important because I have to ask myself the question, if I'm going through a difficult time, what would I do? And yes, I still have the answers in terms of what I would do in order to reduce the thoughts, the feelings when I'm feeling at my lowest point. But I still struggle with that every single day. You know, I wear many hats. I've got many responsibilities, and any day it can be a trigger. And how I navigate that is by having, I guess, a good friendship group, a good circle, and being very meticulous now about my physical health, because for me that links to my mental health. My thing, and I think I go back to the early question, which links to what I'm about to say, purpose becomes so important, because when I know what my mission is, I now can put things into place in order to do that. So likewise, when you say that statistic, it makes me feel like, because I also think about those dark moments and what brought me there, but what got me out. And what got me out was actually my real close friends and those that were there to support me. But then it also makes me worry, because what about all of the people that don't have that close friend like I had? What about if they don't have that support mechanism? So I feel really challenging some of the taboo that exists within our communities. We have to talk about race, class, gender, religion, spirituality. All of these things become really important, because we use words like mental health, but historically for some communities, the word mental health was brandished and it was used as an oppressive title. So some people are like, I don't want to talk about mental health because that might mean, especially for my parents' generation, that meant that a lot of activists in the community, they were told that they were going to some dark room with a lethal injection. I used to get told as I was growing up. So it's about how do we break that down? And I think that starts with people like us, being open, being vulnerable, talking about our triggers, because there may be someone that's watching this might think, whoa, well, if he can, maybe I can. And it's about what step do I need to take to do that. And I think my last point I'm going to make, and what my biggest concern is therapy costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to just highlight here that, you know, many of us are privileged, we're successful, that we can afford therapy. And I worry about all those young people that can't afford the therapy. I also worry about the young men and older men in our community that don't have access to that. And I feel like I'd be disingenuous to sit here and say, oh, you know, having therapy, but therapy costs a lot of money, but I make sure that I can afford it, but not a lot of people can.
I think mental health as an overall picture has been quite interesting in the past decade. You know, we look at the work that Prince William did with his Heads Up campaign about a decade ago, and what that turned into, and the way that mental health as a label is used, and the way that people talk about mental health. And when we were all growing up, we would have known about someone in our school that has depression or has anxiety or has ADHD, and they were kind of seen as different. There was a stigma attached to them. And now we all realise, as we get older and we start looking at our purpose and our responsibility of going, well, hold on a minute, we're all on a scale. And yes, the scale is very different. And yes, someone might have something at 100% and they're on medication for depression. But that doesn't mean that you aren't feeling depressed or sad or low. And that's also okay. And to be going, well, hold on a minute. Yes, I'm not on medication. Yes, I don't need to see a doctor. But it is okay to have those feelings. It is okay to speak out and say, I do need help. Yes, it's not that bad. Yes, let's say it's a relationship problem and I'm over it tomorrow and I'm back to normal again. But as we've spoken about grief, grief doesn't have to be just because you've lost someone. It's losing a part of you. And you can go on that grief journey. And what you were saying earlier on about grief and the emotions and going on that journey is you can have the really down days and then the really good days as well. And being able to be open about that with your friends, with your peers, with anyone, but also with yourself, and going, it is okay to have that conversation. It is okay to feel a bit low. It is okay to seek help. And I think a lot of us, and I think as men, one of the biggest problems is we don't like asking for help, because we've seen in the world that girls, yes, they can go to their mum and dad, but the guy, you know, toughen up, go and get on with it yourself. And then you go, hold on a minute, who's there to help me now? And why would I ask for help if I know that I'm going to get rejected? And so surely it's better to protect myself beforehand and go, look, no one's going to help me. I'm not even going to go for it, than actually have the verification that I'm getting rejected. And I think that's a really big thing that you have to push through, of going, not everyone is going to reject you. Yes, you've had those experiences in the past. Yes, people have unvalidated you. But the world that we're living in today, the ages that we all are now, of going, look, we're all accepted. We're all on that scale. We can all ask for help. We've all got friends, hopefully, that we can speak to. There's someone available for all of us. And therefore going, look, let's just start having these conversations. If you've never had it before, just ask it. You know, ask someone how they are. And then go, I don't really want the yeah you. I don't want the yeah fine you. Tell me something more. Give me some of it in depth into you.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I echo the points that both of you have made. And I think for me, when I went through a relatively difficult phase, a relationship breakdown, and you're right, actually, you don't just have to grieve somebody because of bereavement, you can grieve them because of the absence in your life. You know, you become quite used to certain people, don't you? And it's very easy to become comfortable in those circumstances. And when things change, it does lead to turmoil, emotional turmoil. So I remember having a conversation with one of my friends, a guy that I didn't really know very well at the time. James, his name is. I did tell him I was going to name drop him today. And he kind of said to me, he said, look, bro, you know, I've been through something very similar recently. I completely understand what you're going through. You know, you're having these days where, you know, you don't feel yourself and you feel down and whatever. He said, maybe you should think about just going and have a chat with a therapist. And Craig, I take your point on board completely about therapy being expensive. But he said, just here's the number. You know, here's my therapist that I've just done 6 months with, and I found it really beneficial. And for me, at that point, I kind of realised that here's a guy who I don't necessarily know very well. I've met him through the gym, so it has all of those connotations of being tough and strong and whatever. And he's been willing enough to be vulnerable with me to say, I needed help, and I've gone and sought that help, and it's been beneficial. Why don't you do the same? And of course, I did do that. And then now I find myself in a position where one of my friends just recently has gone through a bit of a bad breakup and is going through the motions, you know, driving himself into the ground, really feeling quite low. And I've said, bro, maybe you should go and have a conversation with a therapist. And he's in that process at the minute. So I think we all have that responsibility that if we've experienced something, that can be beneficial to somebody else. And just by sharing our experiences, especially with our friendship group, we can help them. And I think just to underline that, if we want to challenge some of the societal stigma around mental health, then we have to start with our own friendship groups. You know, so I will make every effort now to be as open as I can with my immediate friends, and even some people that I haven't spoke to for a long time. You know, I had one of my friends reach out to me a few weeks ago and said, look, I'm going through a bit of a rough time. Can we get a coffee? You know, and I sat there with him for a couple of hours, and some of the things he told me shocked me because I felt like, well, when was the last time I reached out to him, you know, and said, how you doing? And actually, rather than just taking the surface level answer, dug a little bit deeper. You know, so I made a point of sitting with him and said, look, you know, if you ever need anything in the future, just message me. I'm always here. You know, and I'll say that to all of my friends now. So I think it is about us as men saying we're there for one another, and you start with your friendship group, and then hopefully that has a ripple effect outwards into society as well.
Can I just build on something really quickly on what Liam just said? Because what's really interesting is everyone is going through something in their lives. And what's interesting, as you've pointed out, is there are a lot of people who have therapists that you wouldn't realise because we're so desensitized to the situation. And so actually, if you start having those conversations, it's likely you're going to find that a lot of other people are going through the same motions as you, have gone through the same motions as you, or have had therapy and they've not spoken about it. And actually going, well, look, we all are the same. We're all men. We're all living in the same country. We're all living in the same society. And actually, we're all going through the same things. We're just not saying it enough. And I think Liam's made an amazing point that you can pay it forward, but also there are systems in place, like a family tree, where everyone connects the dots and everyone is connected like that.
You know, and you can have a conversation with a friend, which can be therapeutic in nature.
Yes.
Okay, it might not be formal therapy, but sometimes just talking has a cathartic, therapeutic effect.
Yeah.
So, and oftentimes what you might find is if you are going through something, sitting with one of your friends, sitting with a family member, a trusted colleague, it doesn't matter who it is, just by the very nature of vocalising what it is that you're experiencing can sometimes make that burden a little less heavy, you know, so...
I think the gents here have made some absolutely excellent points. For me, I think it's just really, really incumbent on every single one of us to normalise this, right? The fact that it applies to all of us. We've all not only been through it and are going through it, but will continue to go through it. Because as I said earlier, I just think human beings being human is this, right? It's riding the wave. And to your point a moment ago, Johnny, one thought that came in my mind is COVID and that period was a real insight that actually behind that closed door, everyone's got their battles. We're all trying our best, making it up as we go along, and just trying to have a good old go at life, right? But to the point the gents made is, for me, it's the word that I keep coming back to is normalise it. We just need to normalise, pardon my French, shit happens. We struggle with it, but we're in it together and we can talk about it, right? And let's talk about it.
So do you think then in the age of social media that there is an immense pressure on men to have everything? A good job, nice car, fancy holidays, spare cash. Do you think you can get lost in comparing yourself to others?
100%. I see it every single day. I think we all know somebody on social media that presents or posts the picture and it's not their reality.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, with the rise of technology and, influence culture and all of these amazing celebrities that seem like they're doing really well financially, it does kind of create this microwave entrepreneurist mentality that if you just do a couple of things, you're going to be successful, and success means you're going to make £1 million overnight.
Yeah.
And then the reality is people have to live and people have to pay real bills. And in the economic climate, it's not as easy as it makes out. So I feel like it definitely does. But I think that causes a ripple effect on relationships. It causes a ripple effect on perceptions. And those perceptions sometimes create tense situations where people are making poor life choices because they want to, look like, I work with parents, and I've seen parents like absolutely kill themselves in order to look a particular type of way, and their children look a particular type of way. But you go to their households and there's no carpet and there's no food in the fridge. And the logic would be is that the basic need would to eat, right? Yeah. But clearly the social perception is greater than the actual need to ensure that there's food and there's actual hygiene within the household. And equally, I see the same thing playing out with young people as well. So when you think about adults generally, I see every single day that people are constantly in comparison, and the like culture that when people post something and they like something, and based on the numbers and the algorithms suggest that these people are more important than others. And then I worry about that mental health of those individuals that may not get all of the likes, may not get all of the attention. What does that say? So going back to your first question about does it mean to be a man? Some men believe I have to be this big alpha male that's super successful. But what about the guys that just do the 9 to 5s? I was a 9 to 5 guy, and I was all right. And I think the perception is now for a lot of the young men that I work with and a lot of them, my peers, to be an entrepreneur and to be a multiple business owner is the thing. And if you're not doing that, then are you really a man?
Can I just make a point directly on that one, if that's okay?
Yeah.
For me, I'm starting to see, so 2 points. First, I almost feel, because of my age, so I'm 43, so you guys don't need to guess, yeah? I feel like I escaped it, this whole culture of social media constantly. I'm now working with young people who, and we're seeing research that's now saying that kids are now starting to shun social media and this cult. Not everybody, it's starting. But I also think, I'm going to use a little anecdote. You guys will have seen it, that at 20, you think everyone's talking and thinking about you. At 40, you stop worrying about what they're thinking. And at 60, you realize no one was thinking about you in the first place. So whether those numbers are quite, I'm obviously not 60, so I don't know if that's quite right. But the point is that for me, regardless of those numbers, that there is a journey that one has to go through, which goes, everyone cares. Then you realize maybe they don't. And then you realize they definitely never in the first place, right? And I do believe that each one of us has to go through that. It's almost like a rite of passage. That's just a slight counter of what I'm seeing and how I feel about it.
Johnny?
Well, it's interesting. If we bring all your three viewpoints together of what we've been discussing in the past couple of answers, to Craig's point, there's a whole business that's been created around social media, okay? So we know the influencers, but now we've got companies that say, come to our building, we'll give you all the backgrounds that you want, so you can take all your pictures for TikTok and pretend you're living that dream. And then you've got companies going, look, have this car drive from point A to point B for 4 minutes, and you can have 4 pictures out of that and 4 videos out of that. And then you're taking 200 pictures to find that perfect picture. And you're going, well, I need to look the best. I need to have everything. And yet you now get, especially, and I know we're talking about men, but especially with girls, they're getting all these fashion brands, which are really expensive, doing these massive hauls of clothes to try them all on for TikTok, to say, look, what dress do you think I look great in? They're looking for that validation. And as guys, we're now going, well, hold on, if it's working for the girls, then it's going to work for the guys. And the guys now going, look at men's fashion, outfit of the day. And here's me in this outfit, and it costs £400, but look at this, give me a like for it, because I've paid for it, and therefore I need to be validated for it. To Nilesh's point about COVID, we now look at what happens when you strip it all bare, when people aren't using social media, and we had nothing. In that COVID year, we didn't have anything, we weren't going anywhere, we weren't doing anything, and yet suddenly, actually, our mental health, we're going, well, hold on a minute, what is my purpose? And actually, I feel the most sane I've ever felt. I feel the real me, because I'm not having to show off. And to your point, Liam, about the gym, when we're looking at being body consciousness and the way we physically look, suddenly social media is dictating to us how we need to look. Yeah. So whether it's our dress sense, our body shapes, what we're eating, how much protein we're having, we're now getting so many messages because of the algorithm of going, you've got to live this certain way of life. And it's almost like what's happened is, you know, with AI of going, this is the perfect man, this is what you need to be. And we're all going, well, look at that scale, because I'm all the way down there. You're telling me to be there, but I can't reach that. It's not possible because of the lifestyle I live. And then you're going, well, hold a minute. Does that mean that I don't belong in society? Does that mean I'm not a man? Does that mean that I shouldn't be here? Because I'm not validated by that person that doesn't exist for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the points I made right at the start was about moderation. And I think, you know, social media has its place and we all consume it on a daily basis. But I think we have to keep in check how much we're consuming, the types of content we're consuming, and also the messages that we're internalizing from the kinds of content that we're consuming as well. Because you're absolutely right. You know, there is an ideal standard when it comes to body image, which, you know, both for women or for men as well. And I think there is an increasing pressure on men to look a certain kind of way, whether that's, you know, shredded or lean or ripped or whatever it might be. And actually it's about acknowledging that that isn't necessarily the main objective for most people or for a lot of people. And sometimes obtaining that level of body image is unrealistic and not necessarily that healthy either. So I think it is about us saying, well, you know, you don't have to conform to a particular type. And even though those messages are out there, you're in control of to what extent you consume those messages. You know, and I think you just have to be a little bit more mindful about the influence that they can have on you as well.
Did you have anything to add, Nilesh?
No.
So there is this sense then of when men are struggling with their mental health that they might turn to drink, drugs as an outlet to escape from their issues. But what are the better and, more importantly, safer ways to get out of that headspace?
It's a working battle. I feel like I'm in a privileged position to answer this question. Because for me, I go on holiday every 3-4 months. That's my exit. I need to be out from the noise. That's what I tell myself. But that works for me because I've put myself in a position to enable myself to do so. But whilst I'm speaking to other men, that also can become an issue in itself because that's not the reality for every man. So I'm also, you know, I don't know what it is about Liam's word reluctant today, but I'm very reluctant to. I found some of your questions quite difficult because whilst I'm in the position I am right now where I'm able to do those things with a few of my peers and friends, I know it's not the experience for all. So I'm also very mindful of not coming across as, well, he's done it, he can say that, but I'm not in that position. I'm very mindful because I feel like I've been blessed and I'm also an exception to the rule in some instances from my experiences of what I've gone through. So that's my escape. As I said earlier, I can go to the gym a million times. I love going to the gym. I love going out with friends. But my ultimate escape is being out of the noise. And that's it for me.
It's interesting when you look at reluctance and the idea of escapism and going, I can do that. So if you said, like, you know, let's say if you're lucky to put £1,000 in savings each month and go, right, I want to go on holiday 4 times a year. And you're going, well, I can afford it. I've got the £1,000 there, but should I be doing that? Am I allowed to do that? And you go, that reluctance of going, well, hold a minute. If I don't do that, if I don't spend that money, then I would have it 50 years down the line when I'm going to need it. And going, well, how do you escape? And that's why a lot of people go to drink and drugs and those sort of activities because it's cheap, it's easy, it's available. But it's taking a step back. And this is easier said than done, to desensitize yourself from the situation and going, well, what is the trigger? What has actually led me to be here? And like I said before, has anyone died? Am I okay? Am I safe? And mentally, physically, spiritually, and going, okay, well, let's take a step back. What are the things that I need to do? What's the things I actually get enjoyment and pleasure out of? And what does actually pleasure mean? What is it to get those endorphins to actually feel happy? Is it going on holiday and just switching off and relaxing? Or is that taking your baggage with you and you've still got all that noise in your head? Is it talking? Is it catharsis that you need? For example, boxing, you know, take a boxing bag and just keep punching at it and letting all that anger out. Or is it actually just having that sense of belonging again, of being with friends and let's say cooking for a dinner party and actually giving? Because I think a lot of the time, the problem that we have is that we're takers. And if we're not takers, we're givers. But being a giver sometimes overcompensates for the takers. And so you feel like you're giving so much out, but you're not getting anything in return. Yeah. And it's just finding that equilibrium of going, okay, well, what can I do that makes me happy for myself? And you guys all working in this space where you're helping a lot of other people is absolutely incredible. And I take my hat off to you all. Because you're giving so much, you can see that sense of belonging that you've got, of going, you know, I've got this experience, but I'm helping others. And that's actually probably where you get most of your enjoyment, is seeing that person go from zero to hero. And it's going, well, can I do something like that on whatever scale it can be that you can actually achieve it on?
Liam?
I think we've spoken a little bit about how we kind of live in a society nowadays of instant gratification, you know, whether it's trying to get rich quick or whatever it might be, or trying to get the body of your dreams overnight. And maybe some of the explanation can be found in people turning to things like drink and drugs in relation to mental health, because it might provide a quick, easy solution to the problem. Yep. But it's important to remember that solution is only temporary and often can exacerbate the problem as well. And I think, we've spoken a lot about therapy and the importance of talking. I think we have to underscore that by saying that this isn't a quick fix. Talking about your issues isn't necessarily going to solve them overnight. And I think we have to be prepared to accept the fact that you might have to engage in therapy for several months. You might have to go through difficult conversations with your friends, families over a period of time in order to unpack and properly resolve the issues that you're experiencing. So we have to move away from trying to find a quick, short, sharp solution to problems that are deeper and more complex, I think.
The only thing I'd add is when we talk about alcohol, look, the biology of it is that it's a depressant, it doesn't help. And I don't want to sit here and sound preachy, right? I made a comment a moment ago about we're all trying our best. When life's hard, and particularly with the work that you do, Craig, you look at some of these youngsters, you understand their parents, and life every day is just hard. And I can understand why someone might turn to alcohol. So I don't want to preach about it, but we kind of know that it doesn't work, right? So if I can go back for a moment, what was my solution? So I talked about my challenges, and that, you're right, it wasn't, I had a couple of conversations with my wife, as brilliant as she is, and tomorrow, a couple of days later, I was fine. It was a period of time, and I've really been conscious of making the point that it's an ongoing journey. But there were three things that really, really helped me. So the first one was silence. So to your point, there's just so much noise around us all the time. The second one was stillness, right? So being still, i.e. not being busy. We talk about running companies, being entrepreneurs. We talked about Instagram. Being busy is, and I'm absolutely guilty of it, it's become quite sexy. It's a badge of honor. I'm busy, right? But just being still. And the final one is solitude. So the kind of 3 S's. And solitude it's not loneliness, it's being alone. And not just from other people, but from other things. So not having your phone with you, right? So I found that repeated time for pause, time for silence. So for example, every morning, I'll wake up barefoot on the grass, have my coffee, have a glass of water, do a bit of breathing in amongst the trees in the garden, as just one little daily practice. And as I said, it's an ongoing thing. It's daily, So yeah, that's just my view on it.
So appearance then. I said earlier that the number of men who are worried about their appearance has risen to 23%. So what impact has body image and your appearance had on your own mental health?
Interesting one. I think image is an important thing. I think I have to take it back to when I was growing up. And you heard me earlier on say about the labels. So I was always the big kid, the aggressive, intimidating one. And to those that know me, I'm far from intimidating and aggressive. But those labels you kind of grow and be with. And I remember my dad used to always say to me, like, just change the way you move. And I was thinking, that's a stupid thing to me. Like, what does that mean? Yeah. And as I've got older, that's progressed into, maybe you should wear a suit when you go to that meeting, or maybe you should do. And everything was really about because of how I looked. And I guess the conflicting thing is, but I'm just me. Like, when will people just appreciate me and my unique self? And that's what impacts a lot of our young people. So you might have a young person that's, very loud and very, warming, but that might get interpreted as somebody being aggressive and all the other negative things that we put and the labels we put on society. So I think that definitely impacts mental health. The power of perception is everything. And I've been on loads of kind of courses, and, you know, even having glasses, people treat me differently when I've got my glasses on versus when I don't have my glasses on. When I've got my night tracksuit on, people treat me differently to when I've got my suit on. So that definitely demonstrates that, predominantly from a perspective of a black male and someone that's young within a community trying to navigate within different spaces. I understand when young people and young adults say to me, yeah, it's more than just what you look like, it's what people's perceptions are. And that's the constant battle that people are dealing with. And especially when you're coming from a minority community where you're trying to, you know, challenge and deplete the stereotypes that people may have about people. That on top of everything else becomes an issue in itself. And I think people don't necessarily understand that, because they'll just say, well, there's two people that live from the same area, same community. Why can't that person do as well? Because maybe they're dealing with another level of scrutiny through the eyes of others that sometimes becomes a big thing. And as a young child, that was something that I always dealt with. And only now we're talking about adultification in the research and how that impacts kids in schools and in colleges. And that was many years ago that I experienced that, and that reflection of that now, even now I've got a 14-year-old son, I'm very mindful about the things that I say to him, like, don't put that hood on your head. And he'll look like, Dad, but it's cold. Because I said that to my dad, it's cold. I know what he's probably thinking is, why would my dad have me not have my hood on? But the reason why I'm doing that is because of that word I said in the beginning, survival.
I think when we look at body image, obviously your trigger is going to be at school when you're finding out who you are. And when you look in school, you've got a popularity hierarchy. And so you had the popular kid in your year, and you probably had the group of popular kids. And, you know, the popular lads were the ones who were going to the gym and they're playing football every afternoon. I hated football, never liked football. And so you're going, well, I don't fit that stereotype. And you go, well, hold on a minute. All those guys, yes, at that time, the girls all fancied them and they had the aesthetic look. But who were they as soon as they left the school system? Because we see school for 7 years, this massive thing. Then we're all in the big world. You know, we're all going to university all around the country. We're a nobody again. And yet you go, actually, hold on a minute. Those guys who, yes, physically were good, but mentally weren't good, versus the ones who were mentally good, but physically not good. There's this weird imbalance. And you're going, well, hold on a minute. Actually, it's probably worth not investing in my look back then, because actually now I'm more sane than I ever was. And using Nilesh's example of the 2014-16, how you look at yourself, I think we build up so much in our heads, you know, the BMI scale, it says, you know, you need to be this amount of weight. And then you go on scale every day and you go, oh God, I'm this weight. No one's going to like me. No one likes me as a person because of the way I look. And then when you're 60, you go, well, hold a minute. It was never based around your look. It's based around your personality. And no one on the whole goes around going, look, that's Johnny, he's the big boy. You know, he's the fat boy. You know, I'm not fat, but yet I see myself as one of the fattest people in the world, because internally that's what I've always said about myself, but no one else is saying that. And so I think being body conscious, and whether it's through TikTok or Instagram or in school, it's only yourself who's being accountable for that. And I'm not talking about accountable for how much you're eating and the exercise you're doing, but accountable going, it is okay to look the way I am. And, you know, we've got 4 guys here from very different backgrounds who all are in the exact same conversation. We're all on the same level playing field, and yet we're all very different, and that's absolutely okay. You know, we can't all be the same, otherwise it'd be boring. So let's all be unique, let's all enjoy ourselves, and just make sure that mentally we're in the right headspace, forgetting about all that noise about the way you look, because your look doesn't actually define everything.
So some really good points. I think the internal narrative is really important. For myself, like you, Craig, you know, I go to the gym quite regularly. I enjoy the physical benefit that I get from the gym, and I also think it helps me maintain, you know, a positive mental attitude. You know, to get into the gym, do a good workout, you get the release of endorphins around your body, and it does make you feel good. So I think there is something to be said for maintaining physical health alongside mental health. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, but I think, again, I've used this word several times, it's about moderation, you know, and from my own experience, there's been times in the past where I probably have taken it to the extreme in terms of how I wanted to look and the level of condition that I wanted to get into, and those sorts of things. And whilst it was great at the time to see myself in that physical condition, what it actually did for me was set an unrealistic threshold that I have since tried to maintain. And I think it's only over the last couple of years where I've started to say to myself, okay, you know what you can look like if you dedicate a good portion of your time to it and you make the sacrifices needed to get there. However, what do you have to sacrifice in order to get there? And I think it's about me now accepting that actually I don't need to be super lean. I can still be in good condition, but I can still enjoy my life at the same time. And that's why I think the word balance is so important in all elements of this discussion, because yes, it's great to go to the gym. Yes, it's great to feel good about yourself, but you have to find the sweet spot and you have to find the point of moderation, I think.
Look, my contribution to this question is, I found this question really interesting. I think it's around body image and so how do I feel about it? I really thought deeply about this one, and I think what I realized, and it's at a point in time, because I have a degenerative condition, I've experienced changes, and I'm okay with the fact that stuff changes. And actually, you know, my wife, my daughter, my nephew, they all, you know, use a lot of humor to help deal with the changes. So, you know, my daughter will say things like, "Daddy, you've got more salt than pepper now," right? And, you know, we'll joke about it and stuff like that, but I'm okay with this one. It kind of is what it is. Yeah.
We've got a few minutes left and we're getting some really good questions actually from audience members.
Okay.
First one, I love this one. What advice would you give to your younger self, perhaps your 15, 16, 17-year-old self?
Trust the process. I don't like to predict. I feel like if I didn't go through what I go through, I wouldn't be here I am today. So trust the process is what I would say.
And I think we're all going to end up using the kind of same type of words. You know, I'd go for everything happens for a reason. You've got to have the downs so that you've got anecdotes, you've got stories, you've got content to tell people. And also going, everything happens for a reason. You'll get there. At some point, trust the process. You will be where you want to be. You will have everything you want to have. But it doesn't come without hard work. And that hard work you might not be able to see. But there's something above us, whether it's spirituality or religion, that's controlling all for us, and it will be there when the time is right.
I absolutely agree. I think, you know, 16-year-old me, I'd probably say you don't need to have everything figured out by the time you're 20. You know, I think, like I said at the start of the podcast, a lot of my personal growth and development has happened since 25. You know, and I think I'm still developing and learning and growing in ways that probably I never could have predicted. So there's no need to have everything figured out when you're 17, 18, even when you're in your mid-20s. You know, life is an ongoing process and you learn continually, I think.
Yeah, look, I tell myself it's going to be all right. Live, right? And to Liam's point, actually, you're so right. You don't really start growing up and learning until your mid-20s and beyond.
Yeah.
You never stop learning, so it's going to be all right.
But also, age is just not a number. You know, whether it's 25, 26, 27, you know, I think it's very easy to compare yourself to your parents, to grandparents, and go, well, they got married at 18 and they had everything set out. And then you look at your friends and they're going, well, you know, they're all married at 18, 19. You're going, well, why am I single? Why am I not married yet? And actually going, well, yes, but the grass is always greener, because you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You don't know the dramas they're having that you're not having. And it might be, yes, they're codependent, and yes, they're in this amazing relationship, but they hate their job, or they hate this. You know, not everyone's got it perfect, and that's why, you know, tell your younger self, don't worry about what age everyone else is doing at. Just focus on you, and it will happen at some point.
Yeah, run your race, right?
Yeah.
Another one we've had, unfortunately, there are a lot of public figures displaying toxic masculinity behaviours that can easily influence young men. Who do you look up to instead? Who are your positive role models?
I'm happy to start on this one. So it's somebody that I've been talking to quite a lot recently, is a chap called Mo Gaudat, former chief officer of Google X, you know, multi-millionaire, super successful, lost his son in a routine operation and decided to serve, basically. Someone that I look up to massively, someone that's a real inspiration to me.
I look up to my nan. I don't look up to figures, and I never have. I come from an environment where you're happy with those that are in your community. So I look up to my nan, my dad, and my peers.
I'd probably echo that as well. I think family members, certainly since my dad passed, I've become a lot closer to my mum and my sister, and they're a source of inspiration for me. I think there are people in my life that I think I have a valuable mentoring relationship with. So one person that comes to mind immediately is Professor David Wilson, who has, of course, affiliations with the university, has been a great mentor to me academically over the years, and has helped me personally as well, you know, in relation to some of the things that we've been speaking about today. It's okay to not be okay all the time and to talk about some of the things that you're facing. So yeah, I'd say him as well, for sure.
I would say if we want public figures, if people want to have people to research, just a couple of other people like Mogor, that's an amazing example. The kind of 5 people that come to my mind are Jay Shetty, Brené Brown, Mel Robbins, Dr. Julie Smith, and also Paul C. Bronson, who does celeb dating, Married at First Sight. He's amazing. I love his Instagram. But also myself. I think we don't do ourselves enough service and justice. And I think, you know, you've got 4 men here who've all been on journeys. And I think sometimes it's taking a step back and going, look actually how much we've all achieved. And mentally, look where we've actually got to. And so, yes, you might be looking for a public figure and having that go on, oh, yeah, well, if they're saying it might be true. But actually trust your own instincts as well. Trust what your internal monologue is saying is actually okay. You know, don't compare it to everyone else. You are doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Just to add to that, if I may, I completely misinterpreted the question. I thought it had to be a man that was a public figure. You reminded me of something Matthew McConaughey said, look up to the version of you in 10 years' time, right? So go and be that guy, and then it's always going to evade you, isn't it? Keep looking up to the guy you could be in 10 years' time. So you reminded me of that.
Way of looking at it.
I'm just going to squeeze in one more audience question because I love it. It's powerful to hear all your bravery and vulnerability to open up to your friends and family when there's still an expectation to be fine. But what would you say to anyone struggling to find their voice?
Go with that one.
What am I going with that? If you're struggling to find your voice, start thinking about what that voice is and where that voice is. So something that I do on New Year's Eve, because I've never had plans on New Year's Eve, you know, everyone's partying away. And I found this really nice way of doing things is I just start writing a letter to myself. And so the way I find my voice is I take my diary and I go through it and I go, in January, this happened to me. Look at the experience now. So, you know, I might have lost a job and going, well, actually, I'm glad I lost that job. Because if I didn't lose that job, number one, I might have been having arguments in that job. And actually, it's better not to have that toxicity, or it allowed me to have the space to be given the next job. The second thing that I do, and this might also help you if you don't want to focus on yourself, is focus on others and bring it back to you. So whilst I'm writing that letter on New Year's Eve, I voice note all my friends and all the people who have done something and meant something to me. And whilst they're all partying at 8:30 at night on New Year's Eve, I'm sending them all voice notes saying how proud I am of them and what I learned from them. And if you do it like that, if you're struggling to find your voice about what it means for you, just think about what it did for them and reflect on it back to you. And that's how I've always found trying to find my voice on those different situations.
Yeah, I think creating the mental space to hear your own voice is important as well. And whether that's cutting out the distractions of the phone. You know, it's so easy to sit there and just scroll endlessly through social media. Yeah. It's going to be impossible to find your voice if all you're doing is distracting yourself with content. So give yourself the space, the mental space. And if that means going for a walk or whatever it might be, to start listening to your own voice, leave your phone at home, those sorts of things. And also writing is really important. And I think all of us have probably done some reflexive writing in the past, journaling. You know, if you can't find your voice, maybe you can articulate it in written form and then you can express it verbally as well. So.
And if you're worried about journaling as well, and you don't know where to begin with it, there are amazing books on Amazon. There's one that's called, I think it's called Journaling for Men that I have. And it has 4 set questions. And it's normally like, what are you grateful for today? What makes you happy today? What's today's quote? What do you want to happen? And notes. And if you need help, look at these books on Amazon, find the right journal that works for you. But it doesn't just have to be just start writing. You know, there are prompts if you do want them.
Anything to add?
I don't write much. I'm neurodivergent, so I try and stay away from writing as much as. So I think my little 2 pence would be is video record yourself.
Yeah, or voice notes.
Or voice note yourself. You can WhatsApp yourself on WhatsApp. And you can talk to yourself and just listen to how you're coming across or listen to your thoughts and your ideas. And I felt like that's been quite useful. But there's nothing wrong with talking to yourself as well. I feel like, you know, the stigma around talking to yourself. And I used to always grow up seeing my mum and nan, and, you know, I have to big up the women in my family because I think that's what makes men as well. And I always heard them talking to themselves, and I used to say, "You're like crazy." But when I think about it now as I'm getting older, like, no, it's not. like, you know, and it's about self, you know, talking to that inner self and constantly bigging up yourself, you know, and I think that also becomes important as well. So just a few strategies outside of for those that might be watching that think, well, I'm not a writer, I'm not a person that notes things down. Draw pictures, take pictures, and just try and find different ways that you can try and find that inner voice.
And you don't have to worry about watching that video back or listening to that voice note. You can just put it out there in the universe and either click delete or just not listen to it and just store it. You don't have to listen to it. If you're scared about what it's being said, don't do it. Do what protects you and just go through the motions of that.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. I'm gutted. I feel like we could be here for like another. I feel like we could easily do this all night, to be honest. But thank you all so much for sharing your personal stories, your piece of advice. With those obviously watching online, I'm sure they've been really incredibly insightful. You know, I hope that you've managed to help so many people today, so we really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. So if you enjoyed this live episode, there are actually, I think, about 20 episodes now of the BCU Alumni Podcast available to enjoy now on the Alumni Podcast playlist, right where you are on the YouTube channel, actually including an incredible episode with Craig from last year, which is absolutely worth a listen. So thank you, and we will see you again very soon.